3, 2, 1. Pervis, welcome back to the December 26th podcast. How are you?
I'm well. I'm excited to be back here. As I told you before we started recording, I was feeling a ways that I saw everybody else on there. I was like, I'm here. What's good? So I'm excited to be here.
Yes. And like I was telling you before we started, I went back and checked your episode number, and I knew you were early on in the freshman classes, as you described it, but it was episode 19. How crazy is that?
It seems like it was just the other day, though, truthfully.
Right. And the way, life has evolved and the way time moves, it's almost scary to me. Like, I think, you hear people talk, you hear the old folks say and the elders say when you're younger, like, life moves fast, life is short, all this other stuff. But the way it has accelerated for me now over the past few years, and then all that we've all individually and collectively experienced, it reminds you that life is truly fleeting and we have a finite amount of time to really get out our dreams and manifest vision and passion. So if nothing else, these check-ins have really reminded me that, like, listen, it's moving at warp speed. And if you want to leave a mark, you better start working towards that.
You just said a whole mouthful. Like, what's your concept? I need to think you are offering, because that was on it. Absolutely.
Yeah. So let's talk about the way your life has evolved. Like I said, you were in our first year, so that was 2018.
Mm-hmm.
And you've been in this thing, though, coaching, speaking, writing books, all of that stuff. But talk to me a bit about how your brand really developed since the last time you were on the show.
Wow. I mean, it's definitely expanded in a lot of ways. I got to go to Australia to do some work with the indigenous people of Australia, teaching them emotional intelligence. I was a guest lecturer at North Carolina Central University a few times. My book Thrive Mode has like gone around the world, and people wanted to be translated into their various languages. What else? I become verified on Instagram and on Facebook and TikTok and all the other platforms. Truthfully, I feel like I've become more known in some respects, but the work I've been doing is still the same, still about transforming lives and things like that. But I would say, like, I'm kind of known as like the guy that helps men with mental health.
Mm-hmm.
So I've kind of been like narrowed down to that person, even though I'm for everybody, but I've been niched.
Yes. And let me say, even though I'm not a man, I did support and buy Survival Mode. Great book. So, but since you brought up working with the men and become known as a man and the person to help men with mental health, let me pause on that, even though we didn't talk about this before, bringing this into the conversation. So you were also a part of our 1-year anniversary dinner, right? Which people still reach out to me about. And one of the moments from that everybody mentions who watches it is when India Robinson said that men are not emotionally resilient, right? That was like a record scratch moment, because men are like, what are you talking about?
Yeah.
Women had really, I think what I found is that a lot of women that I know who've reached out to me feel the same, but felt like they couldn't believe that she said it out loud, right?
I remember that.
And men at the table had a reaction as well. And I think you were a bit more balanced in your response. Now, I want to just revisit that here, because you work with men every day. Do you think, and for those who haven't watched that video, let's just start from the beginning. Do you think that that's an accurate statement?
I don't think it's an accurate statement, but I think it's true for some.
Okay.
I think in her experience, that was true for her, because there are women who have other experiences where that isn't necessarily true. And the thing is, men are not monolithic. And so I don't like to paint with a broad stroke, but there is truth to that statement. Mm-hmm. If that makes sense.
Yes, it does. It does. And so the work that you do with men, do you feel like they exhibit a vulnerability with you and they have a safety in a way that we don't get to see? We being women, the outside world, etc.
I would say that's an accurate statement. Only because I make it very clear that I am not a finished product, that I'm not better than them. And I also share my vulnerabilities, the things that people will find shameful. I share it immediately because I don't want them to ever feel like I'm here and you're here. You know what I mean? And so I think when you create an environment of when you're transparent as a leader, you create an environment for sharing. And so that's why I've been so successful for all these years in connecting with men, because I immediately out the gate I'm like, I've been molested. My father died of a heroin overdose. I've been homeless. I was bullied as a child. I was emasculated. I struggled with suicide ideation, and the list goes on and on and on. I don't have shame around the things that I've been through. And so I know in some respects, every man I encounter can relate to some of those things that I've been through. And I think that just establishes a safe place. I put my business out there. You can put your business out there. It doesn't matter what it is. We all got stuff. And so I think that's why I've been able to connect with men so well.
So thinking about the stuff that you have and the stuff that they have that they're now pouring on you, I won't say dumping. We won't even get into like quarantine and pandemic and all the added stressors there. But before that time, how do you maintain though your own emotional and psychological well-being hearing all of that stuff, right? Because in some ways, when you're a coach and a therapist and all of that, you're a bit of a receptacle in that people come and they're coming with a lot of heavy things. And if you're a spiritual person and you have discernment, there's a whole other element to that as well. So how do you maintain your own stability in that process?
I made a decision long ago that I'm no one's savior. And so I'm not meant to carry any of that stuff. So when the session ends, it ends with me. But that takes work to get there because I care so much and I can become so involved. But I learned when the session's over, it's over for you. And until the next time we have another session. Also, I have community and I also have a therapist and I also pray. So I do things, I have safeguards in place to protect me at all times. But the biggest thing being, once the session's over, it's over for me.
Absolutely. And so you're doing the coaching, you have survival mode, which is taking you to places, unimaginable. I don't even know how you get to the point where you get to work with indigenous people in Australia. That is wild in such a great way. But then, January, February of last year, we start hearing these rumblings that there's a virus out there. It's coming. And those of us who are well connected to either the medical field or large corporations, large organizations, we really knew, right, the conversation that was happening. So what were you thinking when you realized that, okay, I'm a traveling speaker, lecturer, and coach, and I think things might get a little bit difficult? What was going through your mind?
I think, and then also you have contracts that are right? And I had some, several huge contracts that were in person. My first thought was, all right, so we'll just finish on virtual. Like that was my thing. Like, oh, I'll just finish up on virtual. But it wasn't that simple. And it was very complex. And I actually lost a few contracts because they didn't know how to transition quickly enough, and they were in panic. So they're just like, we need to save money, da 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 da. You know what I mean? So like I lost contracts. I think initially I had a little bit of anxiety because I didn't understand fully what was going on. But once I got a grasp of what was happening, it was just kind of like, well, either I'm gonna fold or I'm gonna continue to do what I do. And I just made that choice, and I was like, let me start working out. Fortunately for me, so many people needed my services during the time, so I was booked during the pandemic. And I say that humbly, and I say that with gratitude. And that's actually kind of how my brand actually amplified, was through the pandemic. So I think for me, I had anxiety. And I did have a little bit of fear, but then I said, no, just because I'm in quarantine doesn't mean I have to be in quarantine mentally, creatively, spiritually. And so I just made that decision to not be that.
And you know what I find very interesting as we've been doing these check-ins, and it wasn't designed that we cherry pick the people that we thought things got better for
Mm-hmm.
uh, during this time. But what we have found, which just speaks to the 26er personality and spirit, is
Mm-hmm.
that it is for everybody is open lanes. Like
Yeah.
even if they had difficulty, it's they figured out how to pivot. They
Yeah.
figured out how to make it work for them. And this is why like I'm a firm believer in purpose and passion.
Absolutely. And purpose, I will say this, being in purpose was my saving grace.
Hmm.
It was my self-care
Can you expound a little bit on that? Why it was your self care?
because I felt of use.
Mm,
Because that's, I think that's part of the trauma, right? Is that you don't feel like you're of use. If you're, whatever your respective field was, especially if you loved what you did for a living, what you do for a living, and not being able to do that, you kind of feel like useless. And I think there's something to be said about operating in purpose and being of use. And I know you have to rest and all those things like that, but there is a self-care within that.
mm-hmm.
You're in purpose. So for me, it was that, like, once I was helping so many people, I mean, it was, the stories were crazy, helping fathers who lost their jobs, but they didn't know what to do. They were at home with their children. I was like, yo, you get to be fathers. And that was like revolutionary for them. So it was like just helping so many people throughout the pandemic made me feel alive.
Mm-hmm. And I think that feeling alive has manifested for people in different ways. So
Yeah.
I know a lot of folks who it manifested in a positive way, but
Yeah.
I also know people who are so used to moving 100 miles an hour,
Yeah.
no time checking in internally what's going on emotionally or spiritually. It's just like on to the next thing. You and I both are active in the city. It's that wheeling and dealing. Everybody's angling for opportunity. It's always about connecting here at this event, being seen. And when
Mhm.
all of that went away, I
Yeah.
think some people felt alive in the sense that like, oh, I have a lot of emotions that I have not taken the time to unpack. And a lot of those emotions don't feel good, actually. And do I even like my life? Do I like my career? Do I like the person I'm with? Am I
Mhm.
really happy? Like, I feel like all this stuff was coming out in that we felt almost like feelings that had been pushed so far down. There
Yeah.
was no anchor to keep them that far down, and they came right to the
It
surface.
came right to the surface. And I said that last year was a blessing of some sorts because it was a year of self discovery. People discovered who they are, and most importantly, they discovered who they are not.
Yes.
Hence why therapists now today are in burnout, because there was so many therapists that were overbooked during the pandemic, because people were starting to confront, because they had no choice. They had to confront those issues. And the thing I always tell people, I say, emotions don't die, they just transform, and they show up in various ways that you can never imagine. And I think for us, that you illustrated that perfectly. The anchor, there's no longer an anchor with moving, with
Mm-hmm.
the busyness of life. That was the anchor, right? Now you got to sit still, and now you got to understand and get a grasp of who you are. And that was frightening for a lot of people, because I
Mm-hmm.
think our identities were enmeshed in what we did, or were enmeshed with the busyness, or were enmeshed with the culture, right? And so I think we came to this space of like, yo, who am I? That existential question, who am I?
Yes.
And I think that was a beautiful thing of 2020. And I feel blessed that I was able to help people to navigate through that space.
And do you think that your own vision for your life and who you are expanded or evolved in this time as well?
Yeah, I mean, I definitely I conquered. I mean, I was on TV a lot last year, and that was a frontier that was very frightening for me. And so it caused me to not have time to panic. I just had to do. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
And so like that was the blessing for me within that, is like I was more solidified in, this is what you're supposed to do, Purvis.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean? Like if no other time uh, in your 40 years of living, that year solidified for me, this is what you're supposed to do.
And let's talk about doing what you're supposed to do against the backdrop of like money.
Yeah.
Because when you were on the last time, you shared a story
Yeah.
about that valley experience of like and being in this horrible living situation and being
Homeless.
out in the
Yeah.
world. Yes,
Yeah.
out in the world and still trying to speak and do your thing.
Yeah.
Particularly with like this experience of like, oh, contracts can go away.
Yeah.
Do you feel that you're at a place now in this brand where you're like, not only is this what I'm supposed to be doing, but I have no fear about the finances attached to it?
So you know what's so crazy? So you're in the spirit because I literally had a session with my therapist around the trauma. I didn't realize how much trauma that, living with rats, being homeless, and being impoverished, how much that had an effect on me psychologically. And I didn't realize the other day I wanted to buy some shoes. I was like, I'm gonna buy some Christian Louboutins. I'm gonna buy some nice hard bottoms. And I literally, Delisha, I kid you not, I almost had a panic attack thinking about buying those shoes. I had the money, it was there. I had, you know what I mean? Like that wasn't the issue. But I didn't realize how much that had an effect on me in
Mm-hmm.
terms of, you know, the lack. When you've gone through those things, you don't think about abundance. You just think about you think about what, just want to get by. You think about your mind is aligned with lack. And now that you're no longer in that space, you have to tell yourself, you have to train your mind and soul and your being to be like, no, we're in abundance now.
Mm-hmm.
And abundance doesn't mean like I'm rich or any of those things like that, but I'm not in that space. And also too, knowing that God is my source. And so like everything else is just a resource, but God is my source. And so that freedom, which you're speaking about, I'm making a concerted effort to live in that freedom of I'm not worrying about finances. God is going to be my provider, because I didn't realize how deep seated that pain and trauma was within my spirit until I bought those shoes. And I bought those shoes. And then like, as soon as I bought the shoes, it was like this release. I felt like this release in my body
Yes.
because I was so afraid. I've had like tens of thousands of dollars in the bank, and I'll literally sit there like this, like in fear, like, I need more, I need more, I need more. And I was like, then I said to myself, I was like, Pervis, there was a time you had $100 in your account. Now you got several thousands in your account. Like, what's the issue? What's going on? So I had to process that with my therapist.
Listen, this is how I know this is like a conversation that was meant to happen, because it's the same conversation I had with my therapist maybe like a month ago.
Wow.
And it's a conversation I've been having with Black friends, particularly,
Yeah.
who are successful or have reached a level of financial comfort, who either didn't grow up with it,
Yeah.
or as adults have had some financial valley that
Mm-hmm.
really just took them to the bottom. And anybody who's been through that knows that it's not just about that isolated season. It's about the aftermath, right? Because you got to
Exactly.
rebuild. You might have credit issues, you may owe
Yes.
taxes. It takes so long often to get back on solid footing that you literally have PTSD about it.
Absolutely. And also too, the crazy thing is looking at need and want can be shameful.
Yes.
You know what I mean? And that was the revelation for me. Like, me needing help, me needing things, me wanting things, I looked at that so shamefully. And so I probably missed out on some help
Mm-hmm.
that I could have needed, that I could have used at the time, but I was viewing it in such a shameful way. And I was like, no, needing and wanting is just a human thing. That has nothing to do with poverty or lack. But that was the biggest breakthrough for me.
Yes. And for me, I think it took weeks, but the revelation that I finally had was when you grow up in a culture where like I didn't grow up in like, the fourth generation college grad where everybody went to Morehouse and Spelman and all of
Yeah.
that. I
Yeah.
grew up in like my family worked. Like everybody is like you're just trying
Yes.
to make it, from week to
Yeah.
week. So growing up in that, I saw money as a means of survival, right? It was like you were constantly trying to get it just to keep all the balls in the air.
Yeah.
And even after the degrees and starting my career, and son, I had gone through a period of up and down there. For me, I realized that my energy towards money was always survival and always trying to prevent the other shoe from dropping. So
Yes.
even not being in that place financially, any spending of money that was not tied to my survival felt indulgent.
And you felt guilty about it.
Yes.
You know what I mean? And so one of the things that I do is I believe in tithing and sowing and giving gifts, right? Because I just, that's like a way for me to not feel bound. So I just give gifts. I'll like sow. You know what I mean? I just do random things now, or I'll tip really, really nicely.
Mm-hmm.
I just don't want to have that fear of survival, like how you said. I want to live in a space of liberation as opposed to
Yes.
feeling bound. And obviously, I'm being wise about it, but I also don't want to be. I don't want to be trapped in thinking like, "Yo, I just need money for survival." It's a tool. It's a means to an end. You know what I mean? Like my perspective on it is completely different now. It's a tool.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean? Like I would be doing what I would doing. I would be doing what I do for free. I'm grateful that I get paid well to do what I do. But to me, it's always about, when I think about being a life coach, it's never about the money. It's about the impact, the results, the receipts.
Mm-hmm.
And then the money's just, the byproduct of that. But I don't ever think about, I don't lead with like, oh, how much money I'm getting, da da da. I always lead with, Lord, help me to impact their lives. And while I'm doing that, you need to give me my coin along with that. But I don't ever lead with thinking about money. And I'm grateful for that. If that makes
Absolutely.
sense.
It does. It does. And, we've sort of weaved purpose and spirituality and got into this conversation a bit and revelations and all of that, which is a great segue because I know that you've done work with churches as well.
Yeah.
And as somebody who has grown up in church, understand that whole culture.
Yeah.
I'm wondering if you think there's a shift happening in the approach to mental and emotional wellness at church, right? Where is the conversation changing from just pray, pay your
Yeah.
tithes, so you need a covering, and
Yeah.
everything else will work itself out? Do you think that there's a shift happening?
Absolutely. I've spoken at several churches during the pandemic, and I just actually spoke to a men's group last Saturday. And it was so powerful because I think the Bible, if you really think about it, the Bible really teaches you what therapy is. It's like, it talks about the renewing of the mind, confess your sins to one another so that you may be healed. So there are some principles in the book that apply to mental health, but I think that we look at the Bible totally different than how how it's meant to be written. Right. And so like, I think they're understanding like, yo, that's not a demon. People's brains look different on their
Mm-hmm.
MRI scan. If they have bipolar disorder, their brains look different. And so I think now the revelation is like, yo, no, mental health is a real thing and we need to talk about it. It doesn't minimize who Jesus is, right? It doesn't minimize who God is. If we go to the doctor, right, for our physical health, why don't we go to the doctor for our mental health? We don't have an issue with that. You know what I mean? God created the doctors, he created the coaches, the therapists, the wellness practitioners. All those things, I think now they're understanding, the church is understanding like, yo, it doesn't minimize anything. Because we want our people to be healthy. We want our people to be around. You can't praise. I mean, look, I believe God can do anything, but I think it's something to be said about working through a process. I think God is more interested in who you become as opposed to just your immediate miracle.
Mm.
I think life is about who you become and what you've endured and what you've gone through, that process, that pain, all of that stuff. And to come out on the other side, I think that gives God more glory than anything else.
Oh, that's good.
You know what I'm saying?
Yes.
So I think they're understanding. I think the church is understanding. My pastor actually had my one of my professors from Columbia, who's a neuroscientist, explain to the church like how they've quantified that spirit exists or the various aspects of the brain. The whole session of church was about neuroscience. You know what I mean?
Wow.
Because the mind is so powerful, right? The mind, like they can detect spirit in the brain. You know what I mean? Like it's just powerful. And so I think they're just understanding like, yo, like this doesn't minimize who we are. It's an integration. We need to integrate. That's what life is about, integration. And so I think the church is now getting to that space of like, yo, it's time for us to integrate.
Mm-hmm.
Because
And
people leave with those same issues.
Exactly, exactly. And I think, you know, I have a lot of sentimental connection to the Black church because I grew up in that, and there's something to be said for the sense of community, and many of us had our college application fees paid by church
Yes,
folks, and you know
yes,
the mothers of the church, they come
yeah,
together and they help you. So I have I definitely have it's a soft spot in my heart for it,
yeah,
right, as an institution. But also, I think there's something to be said. There are churches that are evolving,
yeah,
like your pastor, and having these conversations. But I think often the church has played on people, in some instances, barely surviving as well, right? Because we want you to keep coming back. So
and
if,
shamed the people and shamed people.
yes, absolutely. So there's this need for like congregations often to have that fragility in a way
Yeah,
that like you got to come from that for that emotional, because a lot of it is emotional whether we want to admit it or not,
yeah, it
that
is.
emotional shot every week to
Yeah,
get you through the next 7 days and come back and do it all over again. And what I'm happy to see is that I think pastors now are understanding the importance of thriving, and
yeah.
you can thrive, and it doesn't mean that you walk away from the community, but you don't have to be hanging on by a thread to continue this connection to a building and a community and a church as
Right.
well.
Or feel threatened because your congregation is thriving where it seems like they may not need the church anymore. No, it's not that. It's
Hmm.
not that. It's like the spirit needs to be taken care of, but the mind and the body also need to be taken care of. It's a holistic approach that we have to take when it comes to human beings now. It can't just be just the emotion and spirit. It has to be the whole thing.
Yes, absolutely. And so I know like another niche for you is well-known folks,
Yeah,
celebrity, also celebrities. And one of the things I think from the last year too is it was like a level playing field in a lot of ways,
absolutely.
and that you were seeing COVID impact people, no matter economic and social class, no matter level of notoriety. Again, everybody was just home, right? Like production shut down. And obviously there are those who have money, and not all celebs have the money that people think they do, but like
Exactly.
can be at home for a year. So have you continued your work as well with, you know, some well-known folks also?
Yeah, yeah. And it's been, yeah, one in particular, it was really touch and go with that person, working with their psychiatrists and therapists and just making sure that they were on point because it was triggering for them
Mm-hmm.
because they didn't know what to do and they already had an underlying mental health issue. And so because, and part of when you have a mental health issue, there is a space where you have to understand what's happening.
Mm-hmm.
That's how you're able to manage it to a degree. But when you don't understand what's going on, you're kind of like your mind kind of goes on autopilot, right?
Yes.
And so it was definitely touch and go with this one person, for a minute. And obviously, thankfully the hospital didn't release anything and all those things like that. But it was definitely challenging for a lot of celebrities. And I heard through other people who I didn't work with, they were like, "Yo, Pervis such and such is really going through it. Like they're
Mm-hmm.
losing their mind." Because as you stated earlier, it's like the busyness. The
Yes.
busyness becomes your identity. And now you're not busy. Who are you?
Mm-hmm. And also, I think for a lot of folks in that position, a lot of people are counting on them. Like you have to stay busy so I can
Absolutely.
get my paycheck. And if you're
Yeah.
not busy, then what? So it's another, I think, added
Added
layer of
layer.
pressure also.
Absolutely. But I think even with that though, I think even beyond that, it was like the deeper thing was like, who am I?
Yeah.
Why do I do this? Because I think a lot of celebrities really went through some dark moments. You
Mm-hmm.
know what I mean? They went through what they call in Buddhism the dark night of the soul. I think a lot of notable figures went through that because it was like, again, if you think about their average day, they're either doing press or they're traveling, they're shooting, recording, they're doing something, right? There's probably not too much downtime. And to have this much downtime, I'm sure was a blessing for some. But for some, it was definitely a dark moment for them.
And do you think as your career continues to evolve,
Mhm.
that just like you talked about being called to men in mental health, but also Do you think that Hollywood is a space that you're called to?
I do. I do. I it's funny because I used to work, I used to work in industry, entertainment industry and things like that. And it's so funny. Like now I feel like I can do it. I can do the work much better than I could have before because I'm no longer like, oh, that's such and such. I'm like, oh, no, that's my client. Like, you know what I mean? Like my mindset, like I think the Lord took me through that process for a long time. So I wouldn't be like enamored with celebrity, that I would just be like, oh, that's a soul. That's a human being, as opposed, you know what I mean? As opposed to that's such and such. And so I feel like now Hollywood is definitely a thing.
Mm-hmm.
That's definitely going to be a thing for me.
So looking ahead, we know that you are preparing to drop your next book. What can you
Yes.
tell us about that?
So the book is called Heal Forward, and I'm really excited about it. It's another book for men. The concept is that women heal with the future in mind, men heal with the past in mind.
Mm.
And so I want men to know that yes, you've healed the past, but there's also a future for you to have. And so I want you to heal forward with the vision, with the legacy, with the life that you desire. So whether you're 18 or 80, there's still life left to be lived. And I want you to live that life thriving and maximization and in liberation.
And have you set a published date yet?
I haven't. I'm actually checking into a hotel this week to try to get it done. Like I'm like maybe like I think 8,000 words deep in the book now. I'm trying to get to 20,000 because I purposely try to write books that are not too long because I know men are not going to read. No shade. I just don't think many brothers out there are going to read thick books. So, um, yeah. So hopefully I would say maybe by the end of the year.
Okay, got it. By the end of the year.
Maybe by the end.
So now when we started these, we would ask people, we would wrap up by asking them, when the
Yeah.
world opens back up, what's the first thing you're gonna do? Right now, though, people are kind of outside.
Man, I've been
So
pussy rolling since last year. I've been pussy rolling. So
so let me ask you this: is there something that you haven't done that you've been prevented from during this time that you would like to return to?
I miss like block parties.
Mm.
So that like being around people like Spike Lee did that Michael Jackson birthday celebration. Like I miss that. Like I miss being around a bunch of people dancing, eating food and just talking to people. I miss that. I mean, even though I've had those experiences, but the collective of just us partying and having a good time, I miss that.
Mm-hmm.
I
Got
miss
it. So
that's the one thing I miss.
yeah, I so people who listen to the show regularly know like I was home. Like I didn't board flights. I didn't, I was
I
literally in the house, right? I didn't take advantage of like $20 flights. And I'm just now sort of, venturing back out. And because I'm very much like a loner kind of person, I did not struggle as much as other people did with,
Yeah.
with the lack of social interaction. But I saw a group of people that I know last weekend and it felt so good just to like see a human being in person, have a conversation, share a meal, laugh, be loud. Like, and I don't think I realized how much I had missed that level of interaction.
It's funny because introverts, right? A lot of introverts were like, yo, I miss people. And I was like, the introverts are saying this. One of my good friends, he's an introvert, and he was like, during the pandemic, him and his wife, they would sit in the backyard and they would leave the front door open so I could walk in to the kitchen
Mm-hmm.
and just talk to them while they were in the backyard. I would be in the kitchen, and he's the world's biggest introvert, and so like he recognized how much people are necessary, right? Even though
Yes.
you refuel on your own, but people are also necessary. So like that illustration, just what you just shared is like it's so funny because so many. I'm not saying you're introvert, but I'm just, so many people who are loners or who are introverts. They all have said the same thing. They've been like, "Yo, I miss people." I'm
Oh,
like,
I'm definitely an introvert. Yeah.
yeah,
Let's not even get it mistaken. That is
yeah,
definitely who I am. But it's true. It took me a while to get there. I think in the first few months, outside of the anxiety around the illness and all of that, Like the first few months, I was loving it. Like catching up on Netflix documentaries, nobody asking me to go anywhere, nobody asking to come over, which is always awkward when you're an introvert because you need your
Yeah.
time.
Yeah.
But like I now, and I've mentioned this, if not on this show, another show that I might have appeared on, like I think I value the importance of intimacy in a different way. And,
Absolutely.
and intimacy can come in many forms, but needing that human connection, needing physical touch, even in a platonic sense, like you need a
Yeah.
hug, all of those things. I've placed a different value on that.
It is so crazy. So during the pandemic, and I can say this now, I couldn't say it at the time. So one of my closest friends, she doesn't live too far from me. And she was like, I need people. And I was like, I need people too, right? So this was like, I think the second month in, I hadn't seen anyone, no human interaction. I went to her house and we hugged each other for like, it felt like an eternity.
Mm-hmm.
She Lysoled me down. She Lysoled me down as soon as I came into her crib. But we hugged for like an eternity. And I didn't realize, like I'm an extrovert. So I love people, right? People are my business. But I didn't realize the gravity of that until I hugged my friend. We hugged each other forever.
Mm-hmm.
And it made me so appreciative of, of relationships, of community, things that I took for granted. I couldn't go to my favorite. You had Brooklyn Tea on here. You had Jamila on
Yes.
here. Jamila will tell you I was in Brooklyn Tea every day.
Mm.
I hated the fact that I couldn't go to Brooklyn Tea because just the community.
Yes.
So it was like that messed with my mind more than anything else, that I couldn't interact with people.
Yeah, I'm definitely like I've got a new appreciation. I've got a new appreciation for this show. And like, it was a grind doing these interviews in person, but I can't wait to like sit across from the person that I'm talking to and feeling their energy in a different way.
Let me ask you a question. How do you feel knowing that the people that you've interviewed on this show, their brands have elevated? Like everybody's brand has elevated for the most part. That people that I know that you've interviewed.
Every person that I talk to, right? Particularly those who like left an impression on
Yeah.
me, the listeners, and you have those one-off interviews where like, oh, it was cool, but people who particularly bring their whole self to the show
Yeah.
and pull the curtain back, that level of authenticity can't be bought, right? And
Right.
every one of those people has said to me, Jamila came on and said, this was the first interview I did. And to watch how we've come, and people said, like, you changed my whole life. Like I left my job. I'm now in speaking full time, or I release things that I never thought I would release publicly. So to watch how people's brands have grown, it's been a beautiful thing. And I've had people ask me sort of backhandedly, how do you feel that you've been this conduit for folks, and you guys are sort of like trudging along in a sense, or you do this, and some people have really blown up on your back. Well, first of all, nobody's blown up on my back, right?
Right.
This show is just another mechanism for their journey and what God has for them.
Yeah.
So for me to be used, and I
Yeah.
mean that in the most positive way,
Yeah.
used by God, used by spirit,
Yeah.
to really usher somebody into the next chapter of their life and be one component of many,
Yeah.
is I'm honored
That
around
is the
that, right?
greatest honor, to be a conduit. Because honestly, I've helped a lot of people as well whose careers and lives have
Mm-hmm.
taken off. And people ask me, do you feel bitter about it? I say, no, I did what I was supposed to do.
Yes, that's it. And for me, I think it all serves as reinforcement of
Yeah.
what this platform is always meant to be.
That you're in purpose, that you're in purpose. And it's crazy because you were the first person that I admitted the rat and homeless story to.
And you know how many people have come on and said that? I never, we press stop. They're like, I've never told anybody that before.
I literally, because I felt so comfortable with you.
Mm-hmm.
And in sharing that, I was like, there's no shame to that, Purpose, because it really just shows how resilient you are. And I had to have that self narrative with myself, because I think I know I had shame around it. And now I talk about it. The first pages of Heal Forward, I'm talking about homelessness and rats,
Mm-hmm.
and all of that stuff. And that was because you created a space for me to be liberated. So I just wanted to celebrate you and tell you thank you for that.
I appreciate that. And as hard as this work is, people have no idea. You and I were talking about it a bit, what goes on behind the scenes to keep
Yeah.
this little show running, right?
It's not a little
But
show.
I received that.
Yeah.
I received that. I know for me, it's like I know where the show is going.
Yeah.
I have a vision for this show that goes 5-10 years down the line and what
Yeah.
it's gonna expand into. But for me, I see every one of these interviews, and there's so many moments I've had with people where they say, "Oh, you're in spirit," or "This is so timely." So that tells me that I'm right where I'm supposed to be. It doesn't matter whether I'm on television or not. It doesn't matter whether we're booking the big names or not, who people see as big names. I'm right where I'm supposed to be, and I am being honed. My skills are being honed. I'm going through my own journey. I've had self revelation through this process. I've had my own unresolved hurts uncovered and healed just by doing
Mhm.
this show. So I am
Mhm.
being prepared and pruned week after week after week for whatever the rest of my journey looks like. So I don't feel behind. I don't feel like, yo, this guest, they came on the show, the episode blew up, and they blew up before I did. I don't feel any of that. I
Yeah.
literally feel like part of my purpose is giving people freedom to tell the truth,
Yeah.
and freedom from holding things in and feeling like I can't talk about this and I've got to put up a front or a facade, and how that continues to evolve for me as a storyteller,
Yeah.
as a person, as a woman. I'm looking forward and I'm excited by that journey, even if this is just the beginning in some ways still.
Yeah. No, I think it's dope what you just shared, but I also think it's just so important that we just let people know, like, certain people aren't able to disarm.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean? Like, that's a skill, that's a gift, that's an anointing, right? And I think about when I was sitting at that table, the dinner, and I was just like, wow, these are like people from all walks of life, like Jeff Lindor. Like, Jeff Lindor is going to be an icon.
Yes.
And you know what I mean? Like, he's going to be an icon. Aisha is going to be an icon. You know what I'm saying? Like, I was saying to myself, I was just like, I was sitting at the table and I'm just looking, I'm just like, does she even know? I was saying to myself, I was like, does Delisha even know like what is happening here? And I'm happy that you have a revelation of it, that you understand.
Yeah, and I love that who I know these people are going to become, and to be on this journey this early. And one of the things that Demarcus always says is that when we call in a favor and say, "Oh, can you come back on the show?" or "Hey, we're doing this fundraiser. Can you, donate a
Yeah.
product or what have you?"
Yeah.
The response is always anything for
Yeah.
y'all,
Yeah.
anything for y'all. And I think that just speaks to like the real connection. Like we're not out for anybody, we're not angling to take or use. We just want to support and we want to tell our stories, because to your earlier point, we are not a monolith. And what are the ties that bind all of us in the midst of all of these really unique stories and really unique walks of life? So it's been it's been an amazing journey for us. And I'm just excited to see how people continue to grow, how
Yeah.
your brand continues to grow, and where it takes you. It's already taken you across the world, but where else you arrive as well.
I forgot to share this. I actually just signed a contract with a wellness company in the UK.
Really?
Yeah, it's called Reset, and they consider me a guru in the space of coaching. And what's amazing about that experience, and if to leave a nugget with anybody, is you never know who's going to celebrate you, who's going to honor you and receive you as you are. I did a presentation for them on Friday where they can ask the coach questions, right? It was the
Mm-hmm.
whole executive board, and it was like maybe one Black person on the call. It's fine, whatever. But at the end of that call, the Brits were like, "Oh my God, where did you come from?"
Mm.
I've never, this has been the best hour of our lives. And I'm not saying it to gas me up. I'm saying it to say, like, staying in purpose and operating in excellence, you don't know what doors are going to open. I had no idea. They found me. You don't know who's watching. You don't know who's
Right.
checking for you. You don't know whose lives you're inspiring. So anybody who watches this interview, just stay in excellence. because you don't know what doors are going to open up for you. And the same thing for you, Delisha. You don't know what door. It could be that one person who watches it, right? I repost or somebody reposts and they're like, oh my gosh, she's incredible. We need her to be a commentator on CNN. Like, you know what I mean? Like, you just don't know, but just stay in excellence.
That's a good word. Now I need to send your offering. And
No, but you get what I'm saying? Like, no, that's the truth, because I did this for 10 years and no one was saying, Purvis, good job.
mm-hmm.
But I didn't care about that. I cared about making an impact and honoring God, right? Because I feel like that's how you honor God, when you do what he created you to do.
Absolutely.
You know what I mean? Like, I feel like that's how you honor God. Um, and so, like, I did it. I didn't do it for the rewards. I didn't do it for the attention. And now that things are starting to open up, my mission is still the same: change lives. Be a vessel used to change lives. Be a conduit. I like that word, conduit. Be a conduit for change and wholeness in people. So yes, stay in excellence. Like, this is excellence.
And people come to me, and I'll say this before I let you go. People who know me well, and they know when I'm juggling too many things and life is getting crazy and guests cancel or something happens. And there's a small subset of people where they say, "Oh, just skip it. Why, just skip an episode. Why do you, whatever, take some time off." And I think people should, their well-being should be of utmost importance. And if you need to take time off, great. But for me,
Yeah, you like
the
me.
the consistency, I don't care if it's 5 people who are logging in,
Yeah,
or 5,000. It's the consistency for me. And what
yeah,
I always think about, and I've mentioned it on this show, we have a small contingency of listeners who are, when the episode drops at 3 a.m. in the morning on Tuesday, I don't know who these people are between like 3 and 6:30, and some of them are not in the US, but
yeah,
they're on it. I know from the locations it's mainly the same people over and over. And so it's like somebody is being so fed from this that the moment the episode drops, when they get up in the morning and they get into their workout or their commute, they're pressing play. And
mm-hmm.
those are the people who I think about when things are not going my way. And I'm like, ugh. And people are like, you should just take a week off. It's not about like the hundreds of people or the thousands or the person who might hear
Yeah,
it.
yeah,
It's the people who rock with us week in and week out, who are
yeah,
clearly fed in the right way. That's really what keeps me going, on top of me just being type A and being someone who's a creature of habit.
yeah,
But that, like, I feel like if we've heard it, I've heard it my whole life. If you're faithful over a few things, you'll be ruler over much. But for me, this is a proving ground. And if I can continue to sow into this show when life is difficult now, and I built up that goodwill, and people know, like, if nothing else, she's gonna get on that screen, DeMarcus is gonna book the guest, and we're gonna make it happen. Like, to me, this is a proving ground for what is to come down
yeah.
the road.
And again, like I said, I don't know if I was being prophetic, but that CNN thing, what I just shared, was like, I was like, where'd that come from? But yeah,
And you're like the third person who's mentioned that in the last couple of months, and that's like the farthest thing from my mind. But listen, I'm taking it. I'm taking it in.
look, I say stuff. I never share this with you, but I say stuff and it happens. You ask my friends. I say stuff, the wildest stuff, and it manifests.
Yeah. You did tell me a man wasn't it one time. I don't know if you remember that. You was like,
Yes.
he ain't it.
Was I right though?
You were right. Oh, you were absolutely right. And I received it then, because I was already like, yeah. So you were correct. Now, if you can find the one, let me know. Holla at me on that. But
So the one will find you doing what you do.
I'm with it. I am with that for sure.
He will
I
find
received
you
that
doing.
word.
He will find you doing what you do.
All right. Listen, I think that's a great note to end on. Where can people find you online?
You can find me at Pervis Taylor on Instagram, Facebook, and Twitter. And you can go to my news website, pervistaylor.com. I actually just updated it recently. So
Yes, love that.
yeah, and Heal Forward, I probably will be doing pre-orders next month.
Okay, awesome. So we'll be on the lookout for that. Thank you so much for doing this. I'm so proud and just so excited about how things have evolved for you. And because you've been, like you said, you've been doing the work. You were doing the work way before 2018,
Yeah.
and doing the work when it was thankless. So I'm looking forward to see where you go from here.
Same. And I look forward to doing another check-in.
Yes, absolutely.
All of us are at different places. So yeah, I'm looking forward to that. Thank you so much for seeing me. I appreciate that. That means you have no idea how much that means to me to be seen. So thank you.
I love that. To our listeners, you know what to do. If you are, I know you've been touched and impacted by something that Pervis has said, but if you want to learn more about his work, check him out online. If you're looking to work with him, you know how we promote coaches and therapy on this show. If you need a little bit of help, got to work through some things, reach out, send him a note. If you've enjoyed this episode, like, share, subscribe, tell a neighbor about it. And you know, the last thing, as always, remember to be extraordinary on an ordinary day. Take care.